Boopity boop. This is Tuesday, April 12th, advanced class, as we're going to get into the beginning of Gospel. But first, we have to talk about the book report and the information from there. I have on my website, you can go and download this particular form that we're talking about. It's on that form. It's like right below all the directions, and it says the book report checkpoint, or we have it in here in class. Information is up there. Camp information is on Thursday. Make sure you bring it. Oh, I forgot to talk about that. If you guys have medicine for camp, make sure you bring it in either tonight to drop it off, because parents can do it then, or you can bring it into school and take it to the nurse. But you have to bring in the medicine ahead of time if you take it next week. If you want to be able to take ibuprofen or anything like that, then you have to have it filled out ahead of time. If you, the same one that you filled out here, you have to fill out a separate one for camp. Because if you get a headache next week, we don't have those forms with us to check. So if you have a headache next week and you don't turn in that I can take medicine form, all I can do is say, hey, go lick a tree. Because that's all that's going to work. Or go chew on some leaves until it goes away. It's not going to go. Yeah, I know, but good luck. And so if you're going to be able to take actual medicine, make sure you turn in that form. And then we're good to go from there. And then we're going over and talking about the thing to fill out for the checkpoint. You'll find the information on there. You have to have by tomorrow your 3 main stories and then the 2 editorials. Okay. Bailey, what was your question? Problem solved. Abigail.
Can the obituaries be about animals dying?
As long as the animals are important to your story.
Okay.
Okay. Cover.
Today, 5 to 7.
Correct. And that's one of them. I know you can probably bring it in later this week too, but that's the main one they're trying to do. Kelsey.
So I have to take my medicines every day. So I have to take them this weekend. So would I just get the amount I need for camp to come up
Yes.
and then put it in a bag and bring it in?
And yes again.
I don't need the form for that. Do
I don't think so. I think you just bring it in and tell her. Todd.
When it says why is this important, okay, so I'm doing Alice in Wonderland.
Good job.
Can I just say because it's the main part of the story? Or is it actually...
You have to actually explain why that's important. If not, every kid...
It's the main part of the story.
How so?
The story when it
Because
happens.
that's the storyline.
Then put that down. Let's see what happens.
No!
I felt the same way! Yeah, if not, then for the second one, can I just put down this is the second most important thing? For the third one, can I put down this is the third most important thing? Yeah, exactly.
You should write the wise.
Good teamwork. That's way to work together. Also, I put examples over here if you want to see examples of other ones.
Those are really good.
That's why I put them up there. If you want to know how to set yours up like that, I have no idea. I'm assuming there's free apps you can get on either your iPad or something like that.
I can do it.
See, look at that, problem solved. And so you can go and figure out fascinating things like that. Or if you don't have access to fascinating things like that, have access to this fascinating stuff called poster board. And then you just cut yours out and then you glue them on there wherever you want and you can sort of make believe, and that's fine with me too. Right. Right. Don't do it. You have a question?
No.
Okay. Yes, dear.
Do they have to be set up like that, or can you have one page for the headline without the columns?
You mean the part on the grade where it says set up to look like a newspaper?
Yeah, that.
Okay, I was just checking. Then no, you can do it however you want to. That's fine with me.
Okay.
Okay. Fun game you played too. Then, moving on from there, you can put away the book report stuff until tomorrow, and we'll check that from you. Now, let's read about a kid with issues.
Clear off your desk.
With the gospel, we're going to read the little part where it says a note to the readers to give you some background. It's based on this kid named Josh Swinson back in the 90s had an interesting life and things happened to him. And so he wrote up his life story. Problem is, when you're an 18-year-old and in graduating high school, publishing houses don't want to publish your stuff because they don't know you and they don't care. So he gave it to Janet Tajgian, who is a famous author. And she published his story for him. So it's this story about Josh Swinson, and he writes it, but she used her name to sort of make it famous. It explains more in this little note to the reader that we'll get into here in a moment. And so that's why I was giving you a heads up. As we get into it, you're going to have these different characters. And Janet technically is the author, but she's not the author. And then we're going to refer to that a couple times. The Gospel According to Larry. It's an actual website that you can go to and stuff like that. A note to the reader. While I was waiting in line at the local grocery store, a young man approached me and asked me for the time. I told him 4:10. I remember it distinctly, and continued emptying my carriage onto the conveyor belt. He hovered around the store's exit and approached me again as I left. He held a copy of my first novel, True Confessions. "Aren't you a writer?" I told him I was. "I've got a great story for you," he said. "Oh yeah?" I pushed the shopping cart toward my car. "You know who the best person to tell your story is?" He shook his head. "You." He smiled and then offered me a bundle of typed pages held together with twine. It looked like a thesis, but smelled like the bottom of the earth. I didn't touch it. "There are lots of great publishing houses out there." Yeah, I'm aware. I changed it. Good job, kids who know words. "There are lots of great publishing houses out there. I'd start in New York. You can always go the agent route, too." I finished loading the groceries into my car, then gave him my best nice to meet you smile. "You don't understand. I'm not even supposed to be here." I closed the trunk and looked at him. Blonde hair, half grown out in his natural brown, serious eyes, slight build, peaceful smile, 17, 18 years old. He even looked vaguely familiar. "This has to get published." He pressed the papers into my hand. "I don't know what else to do." He stood on one leg, the other one bent and tucked against it. It was a yoga position my son and I practiced all the time. "Tree pose?" I asked. He nodded. "I'm trying to stay balanced." Aren't we all? If you don't know what tree pose is, if you're not up on your current yoga, it's when you stand with one leg straight and then your other leg, you bend it and it comes up to where the knee is, and so you just sort of stand in that position. I know this because I have my Wii Yoga Fit thing that I have done on a little balance board. So much fun. And so that's how he's just sort of standing doing his little yoga position. Technically, you're supposed to also come up into the tree pose with your hands above your head, but I think that's not what he's doing. I think he's just sort of standing and talking. Yes, dear.
How is that a straight?
I don't know. I didn't name it. I'm not a yoga knight. I'm just telling you what it is. I'm pretty sure that's the technical term.
Okay, yogi.
He pulled the paperback Walden from his back pocket, which is... Walden is by Henry David Thoreau, who's from the 1800s, sort of like the first original hippie. He's all about yay for trees and earth and bad for materialism and the fact that, love the things that grow from the ground and hate other people. From his back pocket, he started to read. "To be a philosopher is not merely to have subtle thoughts, nor even to found a school, but so to love wisdom as to live according to its dictates, a life of simplicity, independence, magnanimity, and trust." He looked at me, eyes shining. "Isn't that the best? What do you say to a kid standing on one leg while quoting Thoreau?" I told him I'd read his manuscript. I set it up like a term paper. I typed it on an old manual typewriter in the woods. Then I pulled stuff from the web, added some biblical quotes. He smiled. "It'll all make sense. You'll see." He placed his foot firmly on the ground. "If you decide not to help me, I'll understand." I asked how I should contact him. "That's impossible. I'll contact you." On the drive home, I skimmed through the pages on my lap. I sat in my driveway and continued to read, unfazed by the gallon of ice cream melting in my trunk. I had thought he looked familiar. I raced back to the grocery store to find him, but he'd already gone. By the time he called the next day, I'd read his entire manuscript. "Well?" he asked. His anticipation reminded me so much of my own, waiting to get my first novel published. I told him I had another project I was working on, but thought his version of the story was important and needed to be told. I asked my editor, Christy, if she'd be interested in publishing the manuscript. After reading it, she was. Josh also gave me a disc with photos he'd taken. We placed them throughout the book. The epilogue was my idea to add another perspective. Working on the book, I sometimes found Josh's story inspirational. Other times it seemed eerie and devoid of meaning. In my research, I found some people who said Josh suffered from a bipolar disorder or ADHD. One teacher even said he thought Josh had an acute messiah complex. All I know is the young man I met several times over the course of a month seemed perfectly normal. But don't go by me. I sit in a room and make up stories all day. When my editor mailed me the galleys a few months ago, I talked to Josh the last time. "You realize if we publish this, people will know you're still alive. This whole mess might start up again." His voice sounded calm and rational. "It's really important for me to be honest right now. I just want to write about the truth." I tried to reach him later to give him some copies of the book, but he disappeared. Again, this is his story. Janet Tasjian. The idea of him having a Messiah complex is also going to come up. Do you guys know what a Messiah complex is?
Not really.
Levi?
Thinking that you're like another form of Jesus?
Is correct. Messiah is a savior who comes to rescue people. And if you have a Messiah complex, it's when you think that you're put on earth to save others. Oftentimes, doctors are accused of having a Messiah complex because they're here to save others. And so the problem with Josh is he's 18 years old and he feels he's put on this world to save others. And so he does a lot of saving of people, but how he goes about it is controversial. There's going to be a bunch of pop culture references that he makes in here that I'll put up on the screen for you, because if you're not real familiar with some of your stuff from back in the 90s, then it might throw you off, because that's back when he was around. Part 1. This is the disciple which testifieth of these things, and wrote these things, and we know that his testimony is true. St. John 21:24. If you're unfamiliar, the St. John 21:24 means that quote is from the Bible. Mr. Brovicast, is this a religious book? Nope. And he'll explain more about why it says gospel and why he uses religious quotes a little bit later on. Basically, it's just connecting to other intelligent things. I haven't enjoyed a rant this much since Thoreau, Beth said. We need people stirring up the way we think about things. And there's going to be a whole bunch of little footnotes, those little numbers on there, so I'll keep stopping and have to go down to the bottom to read those. Henry David Thoreau wrote Walden and Civil Disobedience, the books that are up there. We had to read them for English last summer. Very New England, nature is good, materialism is bad. Beth ate it up with a spoon. My best friend Beth was trying to talk me into forming a Larry study group with her. His website, www.thegospelaccordingtolarry.com, received hundreds of hits a day, mostly from teens and college students. No one knew Larry's identity, and that conjecture alone was the source of several companion websites. Many kids at school were fans, but Beth was rabid. Josh, I know neither one of us has ever joined a club in our life, but that's precisely why we should. I tried to listen to the details of her story. I really did. But there's something about Beth's mouth that gets in the way of paying attention to its contents. She would hate me for saying this with her "don't objectify me" rant. Protest all you want, Beth. It's the truth. She often wore a certain brown lipstick and outlined the edges of her lips with this pencil she carried in her bag. Every time she talked, it was like this pale chocolate snow cone staring up at me, waiting to be eaten. I've been in love with her since 6th grade. She didn't have a clue. I'll help you at the club, I said. But just so the two of us can bag all the meetings and laugh at the other people who show up. She was not amused. This isn't a joke. Someone is finally talking about the things I've been saying all along, and I think it's important to help spread the word. Are you in or are you out? Of course, I'm in. I can't let you do this on your own. Next thing I know, you'll be running for prom queen or something. She punched me in the arm, her usual form of affection. Hey, why don't you help me at the store this afternoon? We're having a run on shovels. Beth's father's hardware store had been our work/treehouse/summer camp since grammar school. Sorting the nuts and bolts, counting the different light bulbs, shoveling the wood chips into wheelbarrows had never seemed like a job to either of us. The small store prided itself on carrying everything a homeowner could need. But for a loner like me, it was a non-threatening way to be a part of the community without too much social pressure. I told Beth I'd meet her there at 4. For a brief moment, I pretended we were a couple, not snowbound outside Boston, but romping through the Caribbean surf, tan, in love. My fantasy shattered, however, when she waved goodbye and headed across the cafeteria to Todd Terrific, a new jock she was obsessed with. Can someone please explain to me how this preoccupation with dopey athletes happens even into headstrong young women who work in hardware stores and score 1350s on their SATs? Beth, what are you doing to me? Life was cruel and unfair. What does this Larry guy have to say about that? The rest of school went by like the movie Groundhog Day, where Bill Murray wakes up and every day is the same, down to the last boring details. Even when something new did happen, fire drill, substitute teacher, it was still just a giant yawn in the storyline. To keep myself amused during study hall, I invented a new alphabet based on the sense of smell. I also wrote a skit for Monty Python, in case they ever wanted to reunite. Then drew sketches for the Gumby art project I was working on. Gotta keep busy, I always say. Groundhog Day, great movie, Bill Murray back in 1993, where the same day repeats over and over. If you've never seen it, go out and find it. It'll change your life. Gumby, it's an SNL skit. There's a little bendable guy. There's also my Gumby that's up there hanging from my ceiling, and then back on my wall I have another Gumby and Pokey back over there. So there's a little bendable dude. And then Monty Python is basically they invented classic humor. If you like funny things at all, go spend a week of your life watching back-to-back YouTube things from Monty Python, and you'll spend a week of your life doing the best that you ever possibly could. But that's Monty Python. Yes, dear.
So at home, I don't really like to do things because doing things takes
Good.
exercise.
Hold that
and
thought.
that's
At home that night, I booted up my laptop and logged on. I checked my email, then the small portfolio of stocks my mother left me when she died. I made one last online stop, to Larry. I wondered if Beth was doing the same thing at the same time, in unrequited cyber dating. The Larry logo filled the screen, a peace sign with a dove, and I'll put that back up for you. I said, there you go. A peace sign with a dove, a floppy disk, a planet, and a plug inside each of its 4 sections. I scrolled down through several photographs to comments people had written that day. Pole John posted a new link to Adbusters. Toe Jam ranted about Larry's last sermon, calling it brilliantly flawed. I was in the middle of reading his argument when Peter knocked quickly, then stuck his head in my room. You want some leftover pizza? My stepfather was the ultimate businessman. Even in his terry cloth robe and slippers with the squashed heels, he could command his advertising consulting firm from the brink of failure to unbridled success. He had the whole sales thing down. Firm handshake, warm smile, good listening. It was the real Peter, not put on like lots of other guys in his company. He looked over my shoulder and checked out the screen. Now, I've heard about this, Larry, he said. Some guy bashing our culture online. Some anonymous coward. Some people think it's one of the big televangelists trying to reach the teen market. Or maybe it's a bored housewife in the suburbs looking for something to do. Peter shook his head. Probably some hacker trying to make a name for himself. I'll add that to the list of hypotheses, I said. You do that. He handed me a slice of pizza on a paper towel. Dinner at Catherine's tomorrow? That okay with you? Yes, sure. It's great. Catherine is my stepfather's girlfriend, who'd been putting on the full-court press to become the next Mrs. Swinson. I didn't have the nerve to tell Peter I found her as interesting as a bag of rice. Peter closed the door and headed downstairs to his office. I browsed the Larry archives and printed out the latest sermon to prepare for Beth tomorrow. With Josh's background, with his family, because it gets a little bit confused in the fact that he's living with stepdad, and stepdad has a girlfriend, and you're like, what's going on? Josh, when he was a kid, had mom and dad. Dad left, and then he was just Josh and mom. Mom then has cancer, and then she, while has cancer, gets with Peter. And so her and Peter are together, and then mom dies from cancer, so now it's just Josh living with Peter. And so he gets along with stepdad, even though it's not officially his blood relative. And now Peter, his stepdad, is now trying to date Catherine, who becomes his new stepmom. Family dynamics.
Well, they're not married yet.
Not yet, no. She's putting on the press to become the new Mrs. whatever his name is. Swinson. The sermons that are going to pop up in here are what's from the Larry website. One of those times on the Larry website, he goes on rants, if you will, where he goes and attacks things. He calls them sermons, though, because, gospel, religion. Sermon number 93. Slip on your Gap jeans, your Nike t-shirt, your Reeboks, or maybe even your Cons, if you think that makes you cool and ironic in a Kurt Cobain kind of way. Grab your Adidas backpack, ride to school in your Razor, drink your Poland Spring, eat your Power Bar, write a paper on your iMac, slip on your Ralph Lauren windbreaker, buy the latest CD from Tower, check the caller ID to see who's on the phone, eat your Doritos, drink your Coke, stare at the TV till you're stupefied. Is there any time of the day when we're not being used and abused by the advertising companies? Can we have an inch of free space? Do you mind? Some ambitious kids rent their headspace, the outside, not the inside, although the inside space is certainly emptier, to local companies by shaving ads into their hair for all their friends to see. It's just a matter of time before corporations figure out a way to sell you stuff while you're sleeping. Maybe some kind of vitamin that releases visual and sonic enzymes that run like a ticker tape through the dreams. All the latest releases, now at Blockbuster. Before Blockbuster went out of business. Cheesier nachos at Chili's. By the way, you're snoring. Am I the only one who sees the irony of sitting in lit class reading 1984, having a discussion of Big Brother watching out for us like it's sometime way in the future? Some science fiction nightmare that's never really going to happen. Hello? Our lives could be more dictated by the corporations if they gave our schools audio-visual equipment in exchange for making us watch commercials in class. Oh, yeah, they do that already. Never mind. Good thing Peter hadn't hung around for that one. By 2 a.m., I had 14 pages of notes for the new Larry Club. I'd help Beth for as long as possible, providing I could leave the club as soon as it got weird. Too many people at the same time usually sends me heading for the hills. When I added up all the things I'd done for Beth over the years, I figured it was more effort than they put into developing the last space shuttle, and completely and totally worth it. The part where he says the corporations giving schools audio-visual equipment in exchange for watching commercials, that's why we have that TV up there. Every classroom you'll see has a TV. It's because of this company called Channel 1. Back in 1999, the Channel 1 would go around to schools and they'd say, hey, we will put a TV in every classroom in your school for free. All you have to do is make sure you show our TV show once per day. It was a 14-minute news program, very similar to CNN, except the big difference was Channel 1 had a block of 4 minutes in the middle, which was all commercials aimed at children. And so they managed to make enough money from being able to charge people for those 4 minutes of commercials that they could afford to put free TVs in schools. Nowadays, we don't use the TVs much anymore in the classrooms. They just sort of hang up there precariously to smash a child's head eventually. But at one time, that was the whole point of it. And so nowadays, lower income schools can still do that. You can contact Channel 1 and say, hey, we'll show your program if you come and force feed commercials to our kids for free televisions. And so that's what he's talking about.
Did our school used to do that?
Yeah, that's why for the first, I think 8 years I was teaching here, that we had like every day, it was like required. Like now, if I don't want to show CNN, I don't have to. But back when we had Channel 1, we had to. It was like part of our contract. We would actually be fined money if I did not show you those commercials. Yay, commercial. Joining anything was not my usual thing, by a long shot. It's like that show Survivor, which, by the way, has been around forever, because this was back in the 1990s that he had it. So Survivor, ironically, is surviving. I read in the paper that 50 million people watched it last night. Talk about a reason not to watch something. I don't know about you, but if 50 million people are doing something, I want to be doing something else. Big time. My stepfather's girlfriend calls me quirky, but most of the kids in my school would probably just call me weird. I'm used to it. I've always been that way. I mean, when you're sitting in 3rd grade wearing a paper pyramid on your head to see if the rays of energy will help you concentrate, you're getting some kids looking at you like you're cuckoo. The good news was, I never cared. Never came home crying. Never worried, oh gosh, what will the other kids think? Just plain old oblivious. There's something to be said about ignorance being bliss. Well, not much, of course, but something. When my mother was still alive, she used to threaten the principal for more services, extra tutors, more challenging work. He's 7 years old with an 8th grade math level. You're wasting his time making him add 2 plus 2. I'll homeschool him, I swear. Yeah, Mom, sure. Maybe after a handful of Prozac and a lobotomy. God rest her soul. She was a tireless advocate for me. But she could sit still about as much as I could. I can picture her homeschooling me now. The two of us spelling vocabulary words as we rolled down the hill behind the cemetery. She was a character. Loud voice, loud music, loud clothes. So much fun. Until the ovarian cancer. Much less fun after that. For most of my life with her, the stimulation level was high. And that's always been a turn-on for me. I didn't crawl or walk. One day, I just got up and ran. My very first word, yelled, not spoken, from my car seat as we cruised down the highway was, faster! And once I got a hold of numbers, forget about it. There's a home video of me, probably about 2 years old, sitting on one of those jumpy seats in the kitchen. I'm in front of the refrigerator with colored magnetic numbers doing equations. I swear to God, this is true. 2 years old. My mother's talking to one of her girlfriends while she's taping me, saying, when most babies want formula, they're not talking about math. But it wasn't just numbers. It was learning in general that excited me. I'd go through phases where I devoured any information about the Civil War, Tibetan Buddhism, alpine mountaineering, and planting a perennial garden. I don't know if you know this, but you can lose a lot of friends talking nonstop about peat moss. The usual kid activities like baseball and soccer didn't interest me. I remember having huge fights with my mother while she held open the screen door and forced me to play outside with the neighborhood kids. If you don't go out and play with Carl and Brian right now, there'll be no science homework after dinner. Don't even think about taking my biology away. Josh, get out there and get some fresh air, so help me God, I'm bringing those math books back to the library. She booted me out the door, kicking and screaming. As the years went by, I still preferred to work on my laptop in my hammock swing than be at the high school Super Bowl. Beth used to call me the Wizard, like I was some overgrown Harry Potter. She thought I just twirled around, wasting time, visiting various dictionary sites to look up words like napiform. It means turnip-shaped, but you know that. If you don't know what a turnip is, that's what a turnip is. In case you want to go home tonight and tell your parents, ooh, you're looking awfully napiform today. Every parent would greatly appreciate that. You are not the average 17-year-old, she told me once. But then again, you weren't the average 15 or 12-year-old either. I had to agree with her there. Oh, hang on 1 second. I forgot to plug this in. Just all of a sudden they're like, oh, I can hear everything wonderfully now. Right? Some kid just started crying. I had to agree with her there. It's very simple, really. I've only wanted one thing my whole life, to contribute, to help make the world a better place. It sounds amazingly corny, but pushing civilization forward has always been my highest priority. Not with more technology, not with more money, but with more ideas, more meaning. When we studied Darwin last year, his ideas burned off the page. All of us evolving, moving forward, consciously or not, is probably what was in the back of my mind when I moved those plastic numbers across the refrigerator. It's what's on my mind as I type this now. If Larry was a way to delve into life's deeper meaning, then count me in. There's no chapter numbers because that would make things easy, so it's just random page breaks. Beth made a list of all the kids in our homeroom and who they'd been in the past life. We passed the list back and forth, filling in the blanks. Jack Furtado, Victorian cellist. Laura Newman, Russian cosmonaut, until the bell rang. Out in the hall, my enthusiasm pinned Beth to her locker. You're right! Everything Larry wrote about on his website had something to do with my life. Didn't I tell you? She couldn't have been happier. When I thought about what a consumer glutton my stepfather's girlfriend was, Larry wrote about shopaholics. When I missed my mother, he talked about attachment. It was uncanny. I didn't want to lay it on too thick. Beth's lips shone like a hot mocha coffee. He puts into words exactly what we're thinking. She corrected herself immediately. He or she. But what's with the photos, I asked. Are we supposed to guess Larry's identity? Larry has less than 80 possessions. He posts them on his website, a few at a time, daring people to guess who he is. Right now, everyone's clueless. I mean, what can you tell from a pen and a hairbrush? Maybe you'll be lucky, and the next clue will be his or her driver's license. Beth smiled. I'm sure Larry's saving that one for last. I asked her if she wanted to come over later and talk about my ideas for the club. She frowned. I can't. They have to study for the calculus test. Beth was a lot of things. Gorgeous, smart, determined, also a terrible liar. I stared her down. Okay, I promised I'd help my father with inventory. I kept staring. Darn it, Josh! I told Todd I'd help him clean his basement tonight, okay? Could you please explain how someone as committed to personal growth as you are can vacuum the basement of a class cretin just because she thinks she's in love with him? I don't want to hear it, Beth barked back. There's no one more inconsistent than you. You're a computer geek who hikes in the woods for days. You hate to buy things, yet you always go to Bloomingdale's. That's Bloomingdale's up there. That's different. But forget it. You made your point. She was just gearing up. Look, you're my best friend. We've been bailing each other out since grade school. But not everyone wants to go through life being a hermit, living in the world of ideas. She made quotation marks with her fingers when she said the word ideas. It was one of the only things Beth did that drove me out of my mind. She finally got around to sputtering out the truth about Todd. He's the only cool guy who's ever liked me. I know he can act like a jerk, but do you mind if I let his popularity rub off on me for a while? For some reason, the bare-bones honesty of her plea only fueled my growing sense of annoyance. I'm out of here. And I made those fake quotation marks around the word out, then walked toward lit class. Do you guys know what lit class is?
Lit.
Do you guys know you have a lit class right now? That's this class right here.
Sure.
I could, ouch, it's just a fancy way of saying English class.
Yeah.
I could, and I'm a fancy
Why
person.
would you be
I could feel her behind me, even before she spun me around to face her. I hate fighting with you, she said. Hate it, hate it, hate it! I have daughters, I know how to channel that. We stood silently for a few minutes. It's just that Todd has to have the basement cleaned by the weekend, or he can't play. I'm trying to have some school spirit for once. Plus, he knows I'm really good at organizing things. I wanted to tell her those skills would be put to better use than placing football and basketball trophies in chronological order. But I held my tongue. Instead, I told her I had lots to do, tons to do. Was way too busy to deal with this paltry exchange. I shuffled away as nonchalantly as someone in deep despair could shuffle. My anxiety around Beth could be traced to one thing. I was never included in the endlessly rotating list of guys she had crushes on. Sam, Daniel, Andy, Speedy McDermott, Jack, now Todd. But never, ever me. If the choice were a 2-week vacation in Europe with me, or helping Todd clean his basement, I knew sadly what Beth's choice would be. And there we'll stop.
Maybe they want a Europe trip.
I would be.
A Europe trip?